Most probably Morel and Chateau Renaud returned to their domestic hearths, as they say in the gallery of the chamber in well-turned speeches, and in the theatre of the Rue Richelieu in well-written pieces, but it was not the case with Debray. When he reached the wicket of the Louvre, he turned to the left, galloped across the Carrousel, passed through the Rue Saint-Roch, and, issuing from the Rue de la Michodière, he arrived at M. Danglars' door just at the same time that Villefort's landau, after having deposited him and his wife at the Faubourg Saint-Honoré, stopped to leave the Baroness at her own house. Debray, with the air of a man familiar with the house, entered first into the court, threw his bridle into the hands of a footman, and returned to the door to receive Madame Danglars, to whom he offered his arm, to conduct her to her apartments. The gate once closed, and Debray and the Baroness alone in the court, he asked, "What was the matter with you, Hermina? And why were you so affected at that story, or rather fable, which the Count related?" "Because I have been in such shocking spirits all the evening, my friend," said the Baroness. "No, Hermina," replied Debray, "you cannot make me believe that. On the contrary, you were in excellent spirits when you arrived at the Count's." M. Danglars was disagreeable, certainly, but I know how much you care for his ill humor. Someone has vexed you, I will allow no one to annoy you. You are deceived, Lucien, I assure you, replied Madame Danglars, and what I have told you is really the case, added to the ill humor you remarked, but which I did not think it worth while to allude to. It was evident that Madame Danglars was suffering from that nervous irritability which women frequently cannot account for even to themselves, or that, as Debray had guessed, she had experienced some secret agitation that she would not acknowledge to any one. Being a man who knew that the former of these symptoms was one of the inherent penalties of womanhood, he did not then press his inquiries, but waited for a more appropriate opportunity when he should again interrogate her, or receive an avowal proprio motu. At the door of her apartment the Baroness met Mademoiselle Cornélie, her confidential maid. "What is my daughter doing?" asked Madame Danglars. "She practiced all the evening, and then went to bed," replied Mademoiselle Cornélie. Yet I think I hear her piano. It is Mademoiselle Louise d'Armilly, who is playing while Mademoiselle Danglars is in bed. Well, said Madame Danglars, come and undress me. They entered the bedroom. Debray stretched himself upon a large couch, and Madame Danglars passed into her dressing room with Mademoiselle Cornélie. My dear M. Lucienne, said Madame Danglars through the door, you are always complaining that Eugenie will not address a word to you. Madame, said Lucienne, playing with a little dog, who, recognizing him as a friend of the house, expected to be caressed, I am not the only one who makes similar complaints. I think I heard Mercier say that he could not extract a word from his betrothed. True, said Madame Danglars, yet I think this will all pass off, and that you will one day see her enter your study. My study? At least that of the minister. Why so? To ask for an engagement at the opera. Really, I never saw such an infatuation for music. It is quite ridiculous for a young lady of fashion. Debray smiled. Well, said he, let her come, with your consent and that of the Baron, and we will try and give her an engagement, though we are very poor to pay such talent as hers. Go, Cornélie, said Madame Danglars, I do not require you any longer. Cornélie obeyed, and the next minute Madame Danglars left her room in a charming loose dress, and came and sat down close to Debray. Then she began thoughtfully to caress the little spaniel. Lucien looked at her for a moment in silence. Come, Hermina, he said, after a short time, answer candidly, something vexes you, is it not so? Nothing, answered the Baroness. And yet, as she could scarcely breathe, she rose and went towards a looking-glass. I am frightful tonight, she said. Debray rose, smiling, and was about to contradict the Baroness upon this latter point, when the door opened suddenly. M. Danglars appeared. Debray reseated himself. At the noise of the door Madame Danglars turned round, and looked upon her husband with an astonishment she took no trouble to conceal. Good evening, madam, said the banker. Good evening, M. Debray. Probably the Baroness thought this unexpected visit signified a desire to make up for the sharp words he had uttered during the day. Assuming a dignified air, she turned round to Debray, without answering her husband. "Read me something, M. Debray," she said. Debray, who was slightly disturbed at this visit, recovered himself when he saw the calmness of the Baroness, and took up a book marked by a mother-of-pearl knife inlaid with gold. "Excuse me," said the banker, "but you will tire yourself, Baroness, by such late hours, and M. Debray lives some distance from here." Debray was petrified, not only to hear Danglars speak so calmly and politely, but because it was apparent that beneath outward politeness there really lurked a determined spirit of opposition to anything his wife might wish to do. The Baroness was also surprised, and showed her astonishment by a look which would doubtless have had some effect upon her husband if he had not been intently occupied with the paper, where he was looking to see the closing stock quotations. The result was, that the proud look entirely failed of its purpose. "M. Lucien," said the Baroness, "I assure you I have no desire to sleep, and that I have 1,000 things to tell you this evening, which you must listen to, even though you slept while hearing me." "I am at your service, madam," replied Lucien coldly. "My dear M. Debray," said the banker, "do not kill yourself tonight listening to the follies of Madame Danglars, for you can hear them as well tomorrow, but I claim tonight and will devote it, if you will allow me, to talk over some serious matters with my wife." This time the blow was so well aimed, and hit so directly, that Lucien and the Baroness were staggered, and they interrogated each other with their eyes, as if to seek help against this aggression, but the irresistible will of the master of the house prevailed, and the husband was victorious. "Do not think I wish to turn you out, my dear Debray," continued Danglars. "Oh, no, not at all. An unexpected occurrence forces me to ask my wife to have a little conversation with me. It is so rarely I make such a request, I am sure you cannot grudge it to me." Debray muttered something, bowed and went out, knocking himself against the edge of the door, like Nathan in Ottilie. "It is extraordinary," he said, when the door was closed behind him, "how easily these husbands, whom we ridicule, gain an advantage over us. Lucien having left, Danglars took his place on the sofa, closed the open book, and placing himself in a dreadfully dictatorial attitude, he began playing with the dog, but the animal, not liking him as well as Debray, and attempting to bite him, Danglars seized him by the skin of his neck and threw him upon a couch on the other side of the room. The animal uttered a cry during the transit, but, arrived at its destination, it crouched behind the cushions, and stupefied at such unusual treatment remained silent and motionless. "Do you know, sir," asked the Baroness, "that you are improving? Generally you are only rude, but tonight you are brutal."